Hi, welcome back to the Politics Show on France 24. We've been talking about France's new war in Mali, which is François Hollande's first time as commander-in-chief. We've been asking how this impacts his presidency, and in the second part of the show, I want to focus more on what lies ahead for France, militarily speaking. How long can the country sustain its military effort? I'm going to be putting this question to our guests around the table. Michael Kirtley is with us. He's an independent filmmaker and journalist, been working in the region, in the Sahel region for over 40 years. He'll be bringing us his insights. We've got Gabriella Paracini, journalist at the Wall Street Journal. Mark Dean is with us as well from Bloomberg News, covers French affairs, business and politics, both sides. And Philip Stoner is via Skype taking part in this conversation. He's a former deputy defense attaché at the British Embassy in Paris. So naturally, Philip, let's begin with you. In fact, you know what? First of all, I want to show you some numbers to give you a sense of the size and the proportion of the French military deployment. First of all, France wants to deploy a total of 2,500 soldiers within a pretty short amount of time in Mali, which is definitely going to make it its biggest military operation worldwide. They had 4,000 soldiers, I think, at the height of fighting in Afghanistan, so that gives you a sense of proportion. They also have 12 fighter planes that are currently in the region, most of them in Chad, approximately 15 transport planes and 10 helicopters. That includes transport helicopters and combat helicopters. We'll be getting some detail on what that represents with Philip. And now let's just look at a map. France has been drawing quite widely on resources in the region. So it's getting the fighter jets are taking off from Chad. It got troops from its force Épervier in Chad. It got armored vehicles from Ivory Coast. Planes are on standby in France and can take off from bases in France, flying over the Algerian airspace to go and strike northern Mali. And we also have surveillance planes coming from Senegal. So France drawing very widely on its pretty heavy military presence in West Africa. All right, Philip, in your opinion, does France have a problem in terms of sustainability? I mean, we're talking about a medium-sized political power. Does that mean it's a medium-sized military power? And if so, how far does that take us?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the sustainability issue and the persistence, perhaps to use another term, is going to be an enormous problem. I mean, not least of all when you look at the distances involved. I mean, it's been difficult enough for France and other allies to mount these sort of operations, anti-insurgency operations in Afghanistan, and the distances are significantly smaller. When you look at the whole of West Africa, which is what we're looking at the moment, support from Chad, coming in from the Côte d'Ivoire, also from Senegal in the west, I mean, the distances are enormous, and the northern part of Mali, the northern sector there, is the size of France, and the only way in which it is going to transform itself into a workable solution, really, as far as the French is concerned, is if they move towards a more covert type of operation using far more extensively the drones, which hopefully they're going to have in place sooner or later, and perhaps with the support of the Americans as well, with logistics and satellite support to make all of that work. Because the moment with their current jets based in Chad, with their transport aircraft, really sort of heaving to sort of keep going in these initial weeks, they're going to have major problems within about a month or 2 months' time, just trying to keep this going.
So you're saying that regular forces, regular troops are not quickly going to be insufficient, and France is going to have to rely on more targeted, lighter footprint operations with special forces. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the big lessons certainly the British have learned in Afghanistan is that the helicopter support is absolutely fundamentally essential for their operations, not only for the speed of insertion and actually getting things done, but also for getting out the injured quickly, which is what the French people, demand from their government. So the use of helicopters is absolutely essential. They haven't got enough helicopters, and the distances involved are enormous. And, you can't run helicopters without fuel and support. And that, at the moment, is severely lacking. So it all looks good at the moment as they're going in. And I've always considered the French being absolutely brilliant when they're going forward in the initial phases. They're absolutely superb. The problem is actually making it all last and how they're going to transfer their effort across to the ECOWAS forces when they come in and hopefully sustain it over the longer period, because the problem is just not going to go away in a matter of a month. This is for the long term.
Philip, just so I'm clear on the implications, we'll go straight to you after this, Michael. Just so I'm clear on the implications of what you're saying, does France have the means, the military capacity to achieve its goals, which are essentially to root Islamists out of northern Mali and pretty much out of the region?
I think, to be quite honest, at the moment, probably not. And the reason is because they don't have adequate drones. And the reason why the Americans are particularly strong in this, and if you look at what they're doing in Yemen and so forth, almost sort of going on unnoticed, is the ability to be able to have drones in position at medium and high level on a daily basis, for 24 hours, 36 hours, rooting out people and watching what's going on from a long distance. And then when the time comes, striking when necessary. And that is what the French need in this part of the world. The distances, again, I really underline, are enormous. And it's only possible to do it by using other means rather than boots on the ground.
Michael?
I think that this scenario might be a little selective in that we're assuming that this enemy wants to fight. I'm not so convinced that they want to fight. You know, they've already shown that they're willing to make a tactical retreat. I think it's very possible that they're going to pull off into the desert and wait the French out. And of course, they may suffer from drone attacks, they may suffer from special forces attacks, but overall, they're going to, if that happens, they're going to remain intact. Why would they want to fight a much more powerful French force? Why would they want to fight French special forces? They will wait it out in the desert and see what happens.
Well, at some point, someone, it would seem, I mean, that's what's being planned, is going to bring the fight to them. The French have been saying...
To where? Where are they? Do you know where they are?
The French are saying as soon as we can get the Africans up and running, the African troops, we're going to step back, and we're just supporting the African troops, and they'll be doing the fighting. I don't know how realistic that is, and we can talk about that in a moment. But just in answer to what you're saying, I presume that means that, because you're saying the Islamists can just wait and hide in the desert, I presume the intention is to go and seek them out in the desert and bring the fight to them.
Well, I think if I could add to that, so it was just the fact that, I mean, to a certain extent, absolutely right, we don't know where they are, but occasionally we do know where they are when they take hostages, and that will be a real sort of reference point for the French and the Western ability to be able to sort of move forward. How do we deal with this current hostage crisis in Algeria? That is a specific place, and something will have to be done within the next few days to get those people out.
But under that scenario, you're talking about a very long term. These people don't take hostages every week.
No, sure.
And I think that, I mean, here's what's going to happen very likely. Right now, the French are going to have many successes. They're going to bomb out the Islamists, or I prefer to call them jihadists, from their strongholds in northern Mali. They're already doing that to a certain degree. Then they're going to have to decide how they control and secure that area at the same time that they're thinking about prosecuting the war against the jihadists. And let's not forget, the jihadists do not respect borders. It's not as if the jihadists are there defending a territory like the rebels were in Libya, for example. They're not trying to take over Mali in the same sense that the Taliban are trying to take over Afghanistan, and therefore they see this war as a transnational war.
But you're right in saying, nevertheless, that they would like to take Bamako. They've already said that.
Of course, they would like to take Bamako. They would like to take anything they can. But I don't think that that's their tactical, that's their strategic goal.
I want to bring in Mark and Gabrielle on this. One interesting aspect of this is, and we touched on this in the first part of the debate, France has been saying we don't want to police Africa anymore, and they've been drawing down on their troop numbers in that part of the world over the last few years, and now we find ourselves, we saw them intervene in Ivory Coast. They were decisive in unseating French forces acting under UN mandate were decisive in unseating Laurent Gbagbo, and now in securing the stability of the Malian government. So I suppose the question I'm asking, Gabrielle, is, are we still in a context where France is the policeman of West Africa?
Well, I think that the government has been very wary when it comes to answering this question. And Hollande has made it very clear in so many words that he doesn't want to restore this France-Afrique that you were talking about earlier.
Just 3 weeks ago, in Central African Republic, he said we're not intervening to save President Bozizé.
Absolutely, but the rhetoric that the government, the narrative that the government has developed in these past few days has much to do with inevitability. Actually, the French say that they would have loved to wait out until September, until the ECOWAS force was ready, and there were intervention plans shaping up for later in the year. However, had they not intervened, the rebels would have taken Bamako. So inevitability is really the shield to this kind of criticism that can be brought against the government. And both Hollande and the Foreign Affairs Minister have made it pretty clear in the past few days that they were dragged into the war and they could not wait any longer.
I think that's the narrative that they would have taken Bamako. I'm not so clear that on the ground that that's truthful. What is truthful is that they would have liked to take Mopti and Sévaré, because those are key bases for supply lines to the north. Bamako means going through a very heavily populated area with just a few hundred or maybe 1,000 troops going south. It's not that difficult. It's not that easy to imagine these guys thinking they're actually going to take Bamako. Maybe they wanted to threaten to take Bamako, but I don't feel that that it's a conclusion that's easily made that was in their minds.
Yeah. Mark, your feeling on the potential pitfalls of this operation. You were telling us in the first part of the debate, if we sit around this table again in 3 months' time or in 6 months' time and it's militarily been a disaster, then François Hollande is going to lose a lot of support. We were talking about the political implications for him. Is that what you see happening? Is that one of the credible scenarios here?
Look, I mean, I think we were talking about it a little bit during the break, but I think the most probable scenario, and probably the best scenario for Hollande, is that this all fades from view. And, from the front pages and from the political consciousness of the French voter. That would probably be the best case scenario for Hollande. Now, if things go badly, obviously it's going to look badly on Hollande. Let me get back to the France-Afrique thing for a second. I think that, there is a certain modern right-thinking political idea in this country that France should no longer, be intervening in its former colonies. It looks bad, and no one in France really wants to do that in a way. However, if you just take this as a more global problem, of failed states and places where Western governments still think they want to try and sort of prevent insurgents and base camps for terrorists, Africa is the place where France has a contribution to make. The U.S. can intervene wherever it wants. It has the capacity to do that, but they don't want to do it, and they don't want to seem to be doing it all over the world all the time. France has the pretensions on the global stage and, to a certain extent, the capacity to do it. So the Americans are quite happy to let the French do this, and so that's part of the reason, I think, why it continues to happen. I think that's why France has a hard time actually withdrawing and doing this sort of modern thinking that is easy to talk about in Paris.
Philip, where do you see this operation going? I mean, I'm asking you to look into your crystal ball. We're only in the very, very early stages, but if you could map out what the different scenarios are, likely ones, for our viewers.
Well, I think somebody mentioned, one of your colleagues there, about the idea of fading from view, and I think this really is what must be the sort of the master plan for Hollande behind all of this. This does fade from view, and the only way it can fade from view is if, first of all, a transfer is made from the sort of French intervention here towards the ECOWAS forces, so they are in position in certain of the key positions, relatively, dare I say, secure positions, because frankly they're not up to the same level of training as the French troops, and especially the French special forces. So the ECOWAS have got to get in place. They've got to get into the right places and secure and provide stability, certainly in the south. And then the next thing is to move towards some way by which the whole issue of controlling the northern part of Mali can be done covertly. And by that I mean using surveillance, interception, electronic means. And to allow that to happen, they must have the support of the Americans, certainly in the short term and medium term, because the Americans are the only ones who have the capability in the form of drones, as I mentioned before, but also
Philip, this is one scenario. Presumably, I mean, I get the impression this is the one you would be hoping for if you were still defense attaché right now. Is this, you think, the most likely scenario?
Well, I think, the problem is, that we've seen so many times where if you look at Afghanistan and in Iraq and in other ways, which people come sort of storming in, put boots on the ground, and say that they have to have boots on the ground to make things stable. On the contrary, it actually makes things unstable, and it's quite likely that the same thing could happen here in Mali. So it's quite possible that France might come in and start sort of digging in and having sort of set piece little interactions and trying to sort of restore confidence through ground forces. But I think they need their minds looked at if they thought they were going to get away with that, and to make it work, because after a bit they're going to start taking hits. The attrition rate's going to rise, and that's going to look very bad in France and the French press. So what I'm suggesting here really is what people must be sort of doing behind the scenes in the État-Major des Armées, scratching their heads and figuring out where are we going to be in 6 months' time. And the only way to do this is to somehow take it off the sort of the front pages of the newspapers and turn it into a sort of a Yemen-type situation.
Michael?
That won't happen. I mean, I think it's simplistic to think of the notion of fading from view as being simply a military one.
Yeah.
It's because this is not Afghanistan. This is an area that's very close to the French hearts. This is West Africa. This is the former French colonies.
This is where people go on holiday. For our foreign viewers, I think it's important to point out, it's like Americans going on holiday to Mexico, for instance. People go on holiday to these countries.
And I think that this means that the French media, and especially the French intelligentsia, are going to be very interested in how this reflects on ideas such as neocolonialism, ideas such as France-Afrique, and most importantly, on the humanitarian situation on the ground. In other words, as this is prosecuted, people are going to, there's a lot of French media there. They're not going to only be reporting on a war that they can't see. They're also going to be reporting on the situation on the ground that relates to corruption, that relates to the genesis of al-Qaeda in the area, and most importantly, on how the populations of the North, as this goes forward, are surviving this. Right now, they're surviving it very poorly. Up till now, this has been viewed as the fault of regional actors. In the near future, this is going to be viewed also as an implication of the French.
All right. Michael Kirtley, thank you very much. I'd like to thank all our guests for joining us on set or live via Skype. Michael Kirtley, Mark Dean, Gabriella Perusini, Philip Stoner. Thank you all. Thank you for watching The Politics Show on France 24. Bye-bye.